Good evening, everyone. So first talk of the day. The next 30 minutes, I'm going to delight you with what are data-centric organizations and how can we build them, or how can you build them by building data platforms, good data platforms. So first, who am I? My name is Jonny Daenen. As Chris already said, I am head of knowledge inside Dataminded. Outside Dataminded, so client-facing, I'm also senior data engineer. So when we talk to business leaders like yourselves, these days what I notice is that most of the time people say, we shouldn't talk too much about governance anymore. It's becoming a bit of a word, a dirty word that we don't want or don't dare to say a lot anymore in organizations. So we are going to dive a bit deeper today on what does governance really mean with respect to data and data platforms. So we are going to talk and demystify centralization versus decentralization, because this is what we hear people say, like, how do I centralize or decentralize things? What is self-service and what are data capabilities? We hear these terms a lot, they're becoming the new buzzwords, but there's really no clear definition of what does this mean. And we're going to try to make this a bit more tangible tonight based on our view of the field and what we see in different organizations. So 3 things I will talk about today is first, what are scalable and sustainable data organizations? And what are things that we see as challenges? Then, what are domain-owned data products and how does this solve specific challenges? And thirdly, we will focus on what are good self-service data platforms and what are data capabilities? And how can you use that also to build a good data organization? So to get started, I'm going to reflect on a talk I saw a few weeks ago from Jeremy Drury. He is the Chief Data Officer of IKEA Germany. And he was explaining, this is just a sketch note I made of the first part of his talk, but he was explaining how they transformed IKEA from a catalog, not a data catalog, a real catalog, you remember it probably, like the physical book you got from IKEA, and they transformed that into an app. Everything is an app these days. But he also explained how this is generating value for customers. For example, they implemented a shop and go feature. So when you go to IKEA, you don't have to pass the cash register anymore. So it makes you faster as a customer. The second thing they did is they added a feature that could help customers find an answer to their most important question, where is the toilet? So in-store navigation was added so that people can get value, the toilet in this case, faster and solve their issues. A final thing they're working on is when you use the app to make a video of your living room in AR, you can remove your furniture and place IKEA furniture inside. Obviously, this is all based on that original catalog that was digitized, and this is now their full brand, and they are using this data to the full potential. So they keep trying to get more value of that data. And this is all generating value for customers. And if you then take a step back, if you think about what do we want from data, this is exactly what we want from data. We want to get value from it. Again, it sounds a bit fluffy and fuzzy, but this is what we all do. And let's look at the value generating pipeline. So in the end, we always start from data. We try to get insights from data and understand the current system or process. Then we use that to make decisions, and ultimately that leads to actions that we really take based on those decisions that generates value. You can classify these things into 3 categories. Either we're improving processes, we're making customers more happy, or we're doing innovation. Depending on your view, this is a form of categorization of that value. And over the years, we've invested more and more into making shortcuts, automating things. LLMs are a good example for that. Many of you will probably use LLMs to just do small tasks during your day or to simplify or beautify emails. We're trying to automate more and more. And in this value chain of data, you can also apply automation. But if you then zoom in a bit more deep, you will see what do we do with that data. We query it to get business answers. Like if somebody asks, how many customers are there? You do a query to solve that. You use reports to track progress, to identify trends. We use ML to make predictions. We also train sometimes custom machine learning models. And we also use for operations like real-time live dashboards to make ad hoc decisions. So these are things that we actually do, data tasks that we actually execute. And what do we do to complete those tasks? We build data products, we build data applications, BI, business intelligence dashboards, AI applications, data APIs like a SQL API, and applications, real apps that work with data. But we need to invest a lot in changing these things. There's a lot of things happening. If you zoom back or go back 2 years ago, those LLMs and all the things, they weren't there yet. So you need to invest also in giving people the tools to build those things so that you can stay on top of your industry. All right, but what does this all mean? Again, it was a bit fluffy. Let's make it a bit more concrete now. That value that is generated in your organizations is always generated in specific domains or departments. There's an HR department, there's a marketing department, there's a product department, and there's one special department that's at the bottom, that's IT. That's the gray zone. And that's a bit special. Why? Because typically when we work with data, we tend to centralize a lot of things. We have a dashboarding team. We have a data warehousing team. And then a domain or the business comes with a question. They ask, I want the report. Okay, the team goes to work if they have time because they have a backlog of 20 other dashboards. So in the end, they have limited capacity, which leads to low speed. And they also don't have the domain knowledge. They don't really know what's going on in the marketing or the sales domain. So they build something, they throw it over the wall again, and then it's not exactly what was asked for. And you get a response like, I see 2 different numbers in these dashboards. It doesn't make sense. And you go through the cycle again. So this is a really slow process. Some symptoms you may recognize. It takes months to get dashboards. And if you get one, you need multiple iterations to get it right. But then, okay, let's decentralize. That's probably the answer because centralization is not scalable. Let's now decentralize. And let's sidetrack for a minute. Who of you can drive a car? Okay, that's more or less what I expected, about 90%. Who of you can build a car? Wim, I see you hesitating. Not model cars or anything? Okay, but this is, again, obviously a lot less than the people who can actually drive a car. Why am I asking this? Because if you would need to come to this event today, you probably either took public transport or you drove a car here. You will not build your own car. Why? Yeah, it's quite obvious. Because it would take too long, you don't have the skills, and probably, in my case, the combination of the two. So what would happen if we give people raw tools? This is where I'm heading at. So what would happen if we give people like raw database access or raw tools? Then, in the case of the cars, every domain would build their own version of that car. And sometimes we even get a boat. That's fine, people are happy at first. We were able to build our own thing. It's the illusion of progress. We are making stuff. And then you hit a ceiling. So what happens? First, we have a centralized approach. We have some tools. We have an AWS or Azure account, and we start building. Then we let it open to everybody. Everybody can now start building, but we don't change the tools. We give them open access to everything. So then at step 2, you start to see a ramp up. People start getting first successes. And then at some point in step 3, suddenly you hit a ceiling. What has happened? You cannot integrate data anymore across departments, and you have no ownership. You don't really know like who is actually the person that I should talk to for my use cases, and your quality and speed will decline. This is what happens. So what does that look like in your organization model? Basically, everybody has built data apps, data products, and now you cannot succeed in getting an end-to-end view. And a typical example of that is a customer 360 view. Customer 360 means I want one view of my customer, I want their behavior, I want their sales information, I want their support calls, everything bundled together so I can do hyper-personalization, for example. And 10 years ago, this was quite hot, also in marketing. And 15 years ago, we started with big data. And now, in 2025, we still get these questions every day, like, I cannot integrate my data. So something is off there. We have the big data technology, and we still cannot integrate. So apparently, technology was not the answer. So what happened there? Basically, we had an initial high speed, but people were drifting and doing their own thing. But we have low quality because there's no standards, there's no conventions. Everybody is using a different customer identifier, and we cannot do a join. And it takes 8 months to do that join. This is what we see in many organizations. See some of you smiling, so it's probably recognizable. But this is a really indicative symptom of what we see in the industry today. We still don't succeed in applying governance and standardization in the right way. So decentralization is not sustainable. It gives you the illusion of progress at first, and then you hit the wall. So all good, but yeah, how do we solve this issue of time and quality? How do we make that happen? What do we put in between IT and the rest of the organization? And that's what the remainder of this talk is about. From our view at Dataminded, from our experience, we look at two major important topics. The first one is creating domain ownership via data products. We use a concept, data products, and we put that in the domain. I will talk about that in a minute. The second thing is self-service data platforms. We need to put something in place that helps people build things the good way. Not just the tools, but really something like that car that I showed you. You need to give them something that helps them. And the third point is actually, you cannot buy this. You have your own specific needs as your organization. So you cannot buy this off the shelf. You will always need to do some customization, depending on your industry, the compliance levels that you need. You need to weave in your own needs and ambitions. So let's go for the first one. Let's start at domain-owned data products. What are domain-owned data products? Well, first let's look at the spaghetti state. Typically in an organization, if you look at the domains, finance, product, marketing, and sales, and you look at the lines of data that cross the boundaries, you will look at a spaghetti. Things happen all the time, people build stuff, and you don't see who built it, there's no clear ownership. This is a high-level zoom. It basically looked like this kids puzzle that you see in restaurants, like if you need to find out who owns the data, who made the data, who provided you with the data, you don't really know. There is no answer to that. And this is something we want to solve. There is no ownership. So what happens? Typically, when we build a dashboard, let's say, and a domain says, I want the dashboard on my customer KPIs, please build it. We throw it over the purple wall, and the team starts building. We have an ingestion team ready, and they ingest the data. They don't really understand what's going on, so they have a few questions. Then other people store the data in a lakehouse. Other people do some processing, they join it with other data, and finally they produce a report and they throw it over the purple wall again, and it's not very nicely received because they say, well, this is not what we asked for. In every step to the report, people had questions. They didn't have the domain expertise. My point is, if you look at the left side, there is this knowledge that lives there in the domain. People understand their domain, they're really good at it. And the skills, the technical skills, they live on the right side. And so after this has been delivered, where is the ownership? Everybody will point to each other. And the thing is typically abandoned, or you build a new thing and you get 6,000 dashboards in the end without ownership. So what do we propose? We propose, again, a buzzword, shift left. There is something in there, but let's call it shift left again. We shift it to the domain. We will shift the ownership and the skills to the domain. This will come with some challenges. And what will we do to make that happen? We invent the notion of data product. Well, we didn't invent it. I think it's already widely adopted by many people, at least the name is. But we will have to make this tangible. We will make the line disappear, and we will say to the domain, from now on, you build your own data products. Okay, what does it mean? It means we take a team of people who has the right skills. They will start building something, a dashboard, a reusable data set. They will build something with data, tables, streams, hopefully not an Excel file, not a big fan of that, but it could be. And we will give them the tools to do so. They can work with SQL, dbt, if that sounds familiar to you, Python, and they will also get automation tools. They will be able to automate this whole thing. We wrap that all together, we get into a data product that can consume data and produce data for others to reuse it. And the big thing here is what we introduced at the top, the purple person there, the owner. We will attach ownership to a data product. So that means responsibility, ownership. From that moment on, we're not talking anymore about raw files or tables or columns or rows. we're talking about data products. Every data product that is created needs to serve a purpose. It needs to have an owner, because then you can start linking them up. If they produce and consume something, you link them up, like in the picture here. And if you all know the purpose of this, and this is really key, then you make everything very easy. For example, if this owner would get a request, I need table 1 and 3 to answer questions for the CEO, this is a lot better than saying, me, Johnny, I need access to the data. Because otherwise, that would be very unclear what's the real purpose of that data. So we make things tangible and we make things traceable. In the end, this will allow you to construct a product landscape of these data products, and you can build the final layer that we started from to generate value ultimately. So it will give you an accelerated way from the data to the value. Again, this remains a bit fluffy, but we can make it more fluffy. We can say to the owner, we now have this notion of a data product, and you have the ownership, you have the responsibility to make it valuable, to make it feedback driven, to make it reusable. I can go through this list, you get what my point is. In the end, this means we can start attaching requirements to data products before they can be opened up to others. One example is interoperable. Getting back to my customer 360 example, suppose I have 3 domains generating customer data. Interoperable would mean all of you, if you expose customer data, use the same sort of identifier, so the data can be linked up together. And this might be, for your organization, something very important, so you need to give meaning to what interoperable means in your organization. And this is also what we can help with. We help translating this list of good, but still vague requirements to what your organization actually needs. What is important in your context? And then you can also start measuring these things. You can work with, and this is an example from one of our clients, with scorecards. If you can make things measurable, I won't go in all the details, but for example, we can start measuring whether unit tests or data tests are present. Is it trustworthy, the data product? You can actually just measure that. And you can then see trends. You can also identify departments that are not really good at providing high quality data products. But you can follow up these things. And in the end, this notion of data product is now positioned inside the domains, not outside. They have the responsibility to build data products that are reusable, that are valuable, and they can now operate that data product and make sure it creates value. All right, that was step 1. We introduced data products in the domains. There's now clear ownership, but something is actually missing. How do I make it easy to build such a data product? Because if we already had a bottleneck in the central version, and I'm now saying, but all the domains need data engineers and cloud specialists, where are we going to find those people? So either we train everybody in the organization, I don't think that's a good idea, or we make it easy to do something in the right way. And this is where self-service data platforms come in. So again, the car analogy, if you need to get from point A to point B, please give people the car, don't give them the tools. And this is what this image is about. So traditionally, we give the person access to the cloud or to an environment or to a database. We give them tools and technologies. And if you just need to make a dashboard, this is quite an intimidating stack to learn. You need to learn all these things, and so it can be a bit overwhelming. So instead of upskilling people in all these technologies, we basically say we give you the car version, we give you the tools so that you have no friction on developing a data product. We make it super easy for you to do so. And let's go through the steps on how to build a data product. Suppose I want to build a chatbot. Everybody wants a chatbot these days, so we're going to build one. And we're going to build that for the customer 360 case. I want to query all my data using a chatbot. Okay, so first to build my chatbot, I need to know where is my data. And I contact Rudy. He is working here for 50 years, and he knows where all the data is. So he says, well, you need some marketing data. They have behavioral data. You need some sales data. You need some support data. You can find that in those spaces. Thank you, Rudy. Now I know where to find it at least. But I cannot access it. Rudy says, no problem. I've been a system administrator for years, and beneath the table, he slides me some API keys, so I can actually access all the services myself. I can access all the databases, and I can fetch my data. Again, thanks to Rudy. And finally, before feeding my data to my chatbot, I need to clean some things. There's lots of missing values apparently, some things that don't join up. And Rudy says again, well, I have some mainframe scripts lying around here, just run them on your data, you get clean data. Nice. Okay, I had to go through all these steps and I can finally build my dashboard. But what do we notice about the story? I think it's quite obvious. There's lots of Rudys in my story. I am relying on one person in that organization with a lot of knowledge on the technical and on the domain level. So I'm basically using Rudy as a service. He is providing me with essential data capabilities, the discover capability, the access capability, and the process capability. And the thing is, Rudy doesn't really scale well. So if you have quite some ambitions with your organization and you want all your domains to have these 3 data capabilities, it's not a good idea, because where will you find all these Rudys? You need to find another way of scaling to do it sustainably. So the question now becomes, how do we free up Rudy? What do we need to do? And I'm going to present several implementations that we did also at clients on how to do this. The first thing is discoverability. Ideally, you have a data catalog like here in this mini video, where you just search for customer data and it pops up. And you know, this is the owner and I need to contact them. But how do you get people to fill that in, that catalog? Because probably somebody decided we're using this catalog. Okay, we require everybody, if they want access to the platform, they need to give us a data product. They register the purpose, the data product of what they're going to do. So they answer the what question and the who question. The who is very important. We had that purple person at the top, the owner. Everything that happens on the platform needs an owner. So they fill it in, and based on this, we automatically populate the catalog. We might even scan the tables or everything that's in there, and we push it to the catalog so it becomes discoverable. The second thing, how do I access data? I can now search, I know the owner. We need to connect data products together. So for my 360 bot, I need to have customer data. So I find the product customer data. How do I attach it? Previously it was via Rudy. Now, again, I can fill a form and I can just say, I need data for my customer chatbot, my 360 chatbot. And I need to have it because of this reason. Again, notice the difference. I am not asking that question. I'm asking whether to connect the 2 products. So the owner of the first product, so this one, will get a Teams pop-up that says, the 360 chatbot is asking permission for this data. They can approve or deny. Again, a big difference. If that question says, Jonny is asking for that data, they would have 0 context on why I would be needing that data. With the data product, the purpose-based mindset, they will actually know exactly what it will be used for. All right, so basically, we moved this from Rudy to having a contract between 2 owners of sharing that data. You can have expirations and all that on there. You can have sensitive data that is limited, but the idea is always the same. It's an automated way of providing access that is approved by both parties. And then the next thing I already showed you. How do we make data cleaner? How do we make the processing of the data lighter? We standardize. We actually put rules in place. For example, there needs to be unit tests, there needs to be a clear description on every column that you expose, and we can actually check that. We can check that statically in code, and we can report on that. So it makes things very visible. It's a sort of gamification process of making a good data product. So in the end, these 3 data capabilities, we don't need Rudy anymore. We have discovery, access, and processing fully automated. And this is also something we did at one of our government clients. So we built a self-service platform there, 32 data sources, 30 engineers, 300 plus data products, so that's quite a lot, and more than 600 users of that. If you look at the pyramid, this is a good way. You only need 30 data engineers to have more than 600 users that can create value. And this is what we want to achieve. A very thin bottom layer that can accelerate many people in the organization. All right, let's take a step back now. What did we actually do? And I'm getting a lot of feedback from my engineering colleagues that this is a bad graph, and I agree with them. But for the purpose of examples, I'm still going to show it. So basically, we have a central approach, the Rudy approach, where one person needs to do it all manually. And we have the spaghetti approach, this decentralized approach. And in the beginning, I told you, well, both attempts make no sense. We need to find something else. And that something else is basically in the middle. It's called self-service. What do we need to do? Basically, what we did for access, it used to be Rudy who hands out the keys. But now not anymore. We invested in decentralizing Rudy, and we made it a bit more self-service. Everybody can now request access. What we also did is the discovery. Discovery used to be decentral. I had to ask around to people. It was already decentral, but it was not efficient. So we actually made it a bit more central by having that data catalog in place. Now, the thing is, if you make things more effortless, more self-service, this will cost you money. Because if you come from central, you will have to automate and put in guardrails to replace Rudy. If you come from decentral, this can be really painful, because if you have 100 teams that already are doing things in their own ways, you need to migrate everything that they did. So it will, again, cost you a lot of money to standardize and migrate. So you have to make conscious choices on what you do. And the bad news is basically we cover 3 capabilities, but there's a lot more. So in your organization, you might have to go over many capabilities and see, well, do we want to make them all self-service? Even more bad news, you cannot buy this. The ones in green, for example, are the ones that you get when you buy Databricks or Snowflake. You will only get like a few of these, but all the rest depends on your organization. And again, they will all cost you money if you decide to make them self-service. The good news is you don't need them all, at least not today. So what is important here is, first, we embrace the granularity. It's clear that it's not central or decentral on a top level. It's central or decentral on a more granular level. You have all these circles for which you can decide that. And you can pick and choose. Timing is key. Timing is key. Why? Because in the end, you have to activate the circles whenever it makes sense. For example, if you have one team that is working on ML models, that's experimenting with language models, that's fine. You should not make that self-service. If you see 2 teams, 3 teams start using it, 4 teams, it might make sense to assist them and to make something self-service. So the timing is really key. You need to know when to activate. And this is also where we help organizations choosing what is a priority to activate in your data platform. And this also allows for innovation. Like for a client that we have in the energy sector, we have a similar story. We have 10 platform engineers enabling more than 50 data engineers and scientists, again building more than 100 products and 60 business-facing use cases. This is again a good value chain. And in that organization, we basically saw the rise of AI/ML. There was first a small area where AI/ML was getting more popular, also the language models, the Gen AI part. And then as adoption grew, at some point we said, okay, now it is time to pull it into the self-service mode so that everybody can benefit if they want. We make it a central capability that is self-service. And again, that is key to do in your organization. All right, what's the takeaway? So we started with the question, how can we get to a scalable and a sustainable organization? Centralization, not a good option. Decentralization, also not a good option. So we have the approach of investing in domain-owned data products. We introduce that concept and say to the domains, please, you need to build this because it will be faster and better. So we put knowledge, skills, and ownership together in the domains. Second point, self-service data platforms. We actually structurally empower the people to do so because they will need too much technical knowledge to build a data product. We make it easy for them. And we don't give them the car components, we give them the car to drive with. And finally, you cannot buy all of this. You have to interweave your own processes, your own strategy, your own organization DNA into all of these components, because you will have to decide when it's key to activate something. And now inevitably the question becomes, how do we help clients with this? And this is basically a brief summary. Dataminded, we can help you with many of these things. We can help you with our consulting on the domain of data products, the self-service data platforms, but we recently are also expanding more into the strategy part, connecting that operating model, your processes, your people into those processes of the platform is also something we do. The second part, we have some products that can accelerate you. And again, I told you, you cannot buy all of these things. You can only buy a few of the components that can accelerate you. So there we have Portal, which helps you manage data products. It's an open source component. And Portal and Conveyor for also being parts of those circles in your data platform. And finally, our Academy services. Those most of you are probably familiar with. We can help you upskill your people as well, because self-service is only one way to make things scale. You can also make sure that the knowledge ends up with the people. And then one final remark, because lots of people are talking about data mesh, of course. And when we look at data mesh, this is actually an implementation of data mesh. You have 4 critical components of data mesh, and they all fit in very nicely with what this means. But what we try to do at organizations is make it tangible. We translate these fuzzy, fluffy concepts into real things that you can measure, that you can execute, and that you can see. All right, so if there's one takeaway of this whole slide, then it's this one. You should decentralize your ownership and your execution, and you should centralize your principles, your rules, and your tools. Thank you.